Hello, everyone. Clay with Claiborne LSAT here to set up a logic game for you and show you the power of setting up the game boards in advance via what we call the decision tree method. And I'm going to do this today in concert with a number of videos on Prep Test 88 in particular, as we push out these LSAT videos, these logic game videos on YouTube and other places. I wanted to take all 4 games from a particular test and talk a little bit about how all of those games can work together. So I recommend watching this video in concert with the others from Prep Test 88. Prep Test 88 was a really interesting logic game section that came on the heels of several of the released LSATs, at least, that had been rather easy, rather straightforward. Prep Test 88 was all of a sudden quite challenging and had some interesting wrinkles to it, including a couple that we hadn't seen in a long time. So the first game of Prep Test 88 is probably the most straightforward of the bunch. So I'm going to go ahead and label this one that this is 88, the first logic game. And it has a couple of aspects to it. It's really it has features of both sequencing and grouping. So let me show you how that kind of plays out, because there are times where you're going to feel like, well, what we call it isn't even that important, but what exactly is going on? There are pens 1 through 5 here for these animals, but the rules aren't so much focused, at least not totally, on the sequencing aspect. So we want to keep that in mind. And I should add at this point that you need to have the text in front of you out of respect for LSAT's copyright. I'm not going to be reading the whole text. I'm not going to be putting it up on the screen. And I'm not going to be going through the questions, because our focus is on the setup and what we can do in that process. And then you can run with the questions from there and tease out the implications of what you see on this video. All right, so we have the 5 pens. When you have 2 subcategories, like kittens and puppies, you can use subscripts for that. Or if there's only 2 groups, you can just use lowercase and capital letters. That's a handy solution, especially when there's maybe an intuitiveness to it. Puppies are a little bit bigger than kittens, so I'm gonna call the puppies capital letters, and we'll do lowercase for the kittens. Now it's interesting because we have 5 pens, but there's an in and out aspect to this, because there's 8 possible players, only 5 of which are going to be selected. So there's very much a grouping feel to this, as well as sequencing. There's kind of a number of things going on. Now, as you look at the rules, I'm going to go ahead and label the columns number 1 and 5 as K, because those have to be kittens. The other rules aren't great ones to work with right away. We don't have a block, which is the kind of rule that we love the most, 2 that are grouped together or right next to each other. But conditional rules are very powerful. And it's often worth saying, okay, what if the sufficient condition is true, and what if it's false? You can call it the yes-no approach. Say yes to the sufficient condition, and then say no to it. So let's take this last rule, the only one that's in if-then format, and say, all right, what happens if wags is in and then what it says about G? Well, W is a puppy, and that forces G into number 2. But you can't have a puppy in 1 and 5. So really our only options, if we're going to put W in at all, is 3 and 4. Notice how we're already kind of narrowing down, drawing inferences in this kind of either or way of thinking, this decision tree. Is it 3? Is it 4? What are the branches of the tree? Well, if W is in 3, making G in 2, that's one possibility we can explore. So we want to think, well, what does that mean for everyone else? The other rules are now going to become more into play. Taffy can't be next to a kitten, so we're not going to get Taffy in here at all, because the only remaining space for a non-kitten is in number 4, and that would be next to a kitten. So we can't have a T there. And we do need to have kittens in 1 and 5, But we also have this thing about G or H. We're always going to have G or H. You might even like put a slash between them, but you're never going to have both of them. So since we have G here, we can't have H at all. So our remaining two kittens are going to have to fill spots number 1 and 5. So we'll say F/J, J/F. And what that means is a puppy is in number 4. The only possibilities remaining are R and S. So we'll just put that in as a slash. All right, so that really diagrams out, summarizes what all can happen if W is in 3. So we mentioned the other option for W is that it could be in 4, but keep this in mind. That's still going to force G to 2. So it's not really going to change very much. It's still going to be true that T cannot be anywhere because it's going to be next to a kitten no matter where it is. So you could go ahead and diagram out W in 4, but you might also notice, well, that's going to force pretty much everything to be the same. So we could actually just put a handle here. Let me explain that again to make sure that that's clear. If W's in 4, meaning G's in 2, we still can't have Taffy. Anywhere remaining would be either a kitten or next to a kitten. And we still can't have H because G is in there. So F and J fill spots number 1 and 5, and R and S fill the only remaining spot, which if W goes to 4, would be in 3. So that's really handy because in just one game board with a handle and some slashes, we've explored all the possibilities for W being in. So the premise of everything else we do here, the other branch of the decision tree, is that W is out. Everything else we explore cannot include W. Well, if that's true, we don't have as handy a rule to deal with here. So we need to figure out a way to kind of narrow down the other possibilities. We still know that we need kittens in 1 and 5. And we know that G or H is going to have to be in. We also know that T can't be next to a kitten. So I'm going to focus on T for a moment, because if you think about what that really means, well, T is not a kitten, nor is it next to a kitten, that is spots 2 or 4. All of a sudden you realize, oh, if T is going to be in at all, it's got to be in number 3. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in and explore what does it look like for T to be in, and then what does it look like for T to be out? Those are our options here. Well, if T is in, we know that W is out. There's a number of free options for everyone else. We still have G or H, F, and J. So we have some options for what the kittens can look like. But T can't be next to a kitten. Here's the key part. So we can still have kittens on the end, but we're going to have to surround T with puppies. The only way to do that with W out is to surround T with R and S. So that's a handy inference. And you know what? I would actually just leave these spots blank at this point. If you want, you can come out to one side and say, well, hey, I know that that's, all that are remaining are F and either G or H, and then J. You don't have to write that out to the side because we already have a label at the top that these are kittens. As long as you're careful not to put in both G and H, you're pretty much good to go. Kitten here, we don't know who it is. Kitten here, we don't know who it is, but T surrounded by puppies. All right, now remember, that's the only way that T can be in at all, is in spot number 3. So we were already assuming that W is out, having explored what would happen if W was in. Now we're going to put T out as well. We're starting to run out of puppies here. And now we begin to think more about the numbers. We still need to fill 5 spaces, but with 2 players out, there's only 6 left. Is there anything else that helps us narrow it down further? There absolutely is. The G or H rule. They can't both be in. So we now actually know who the 5 are in this case. We're definitely going to have F. We're definitely going to have one of G or H. We're definitely going to have J. Then we have to have R, and we have to have S. We know who the 5 animals are. It's just a matter of their order. Now, unfortunately, there's not a lot we can say about that outside of the fact that the kittens are in 1 and 5. So the remaining kind of toggling we can do to explore possibilities really has to do with the fact that R and S are puppies, and they therefore can't go in 1 or 5. So you could just note this very broadly at this point, but if you were to explore it a little bit further, I would say, well, there's only 3 possibilities, right? They're either in 2 and 3 in some order, or they're in 2 and 4 in some order, or they're in 3 and 4 in some order. That's going to be game boards 3, 4, and 5, revolving around the placement of R and S. Now, beyond that, I have to realize, well, our kittens are completely unencumbered at this point. Kittens roaming free, that's always a dangerous thing, as somebody who has kittens can tell you. So I might even just put like a lowercase k in the remaining places in each of these game boards, just to remind myself, the ones who are left, well, in this case, really all the kittens, except it can't be both G and H, are going to fill the remaining spots. Even though that's rather vague and done by category rather than by individual element, the bottom line is it brings a lot of peace of mind and knowledge to have every blank basically filled in, even if we have some handles and some slashes and the category label of kittens. This is definitely not a high yield game. We can't simply in 2 or 3 or 4 game boards nail down everything that's happening. But in 5 game boards, we've given ourselves some really good outlines of what's happening. And as I've mentioned in other videos, we don't really have to think too hard about the inferences because they come naturally when we start to draw out the possibilities. For example, a nice inference for this game is that one of R or S is always in there. Do you notice that? That's the kind of thing they may well ask a question about. Here there's an R or S, and then in all 4 of the remaining game boards after number 1, both R and S are included. So even though R and S are floaters, we actually find out that they usually have to be in, and always one of them has to be in. I hope you can see from that how effective this the method of the decision tree thought process and the game boards that come out of it can really be. What would you know about these floaters, R and S, if you hadn't really gone through the possibilities and sort of knocked others out of the way to realize, oh wait, I'm pretty much always having to put those in order to fill up the spaces. We now have an excellent framework for thinking about the questions and are in outstanding shape, even in kind of a medium yield situation, to attack those questions. So I encourage you to go do that now, work out the questions, use the game boards we put together here as your template, and see how that works for you. Then come back and check out the other logic games videos, especially the ones that have to do with Prep Test 88.